Good day. Welcome back to the episode. This episode is episode 5 of the Karate is Dead podcast. We have a special guest, my friend from New York City, Dr. Peter Goldman. Yes. All right. Just a little bit quick history about Dr. Peter Goldman. Black belt in Kyokushin Karate. He was part of the World Oyama elite fight team in New York City headquarters. Black belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and he's also a doctor in chiropractor, right? As I said, and he's the founder of the Zone Healing Method. And so we're going to talk to him about everything, try to cover most of his career in all 3 areas. But before we go into the show, I want you to subscribe to this show because we're going to have very interesting guests on this show and you don't want to miss. All right. So Dr. Pete, how are you, my brother?
I'm doing great, and I'm excited that I made it into the top 10. Show 5. I'm excited I made it into the top 10. So thank you.
Yes, sir. We're excited. For those who might not know, back in the early 2000s, I did a podcast called Martial Arts Weekly, and Dr. Pete was one of my first, I think the first 5 or 3 guests on the show. And ever since then, we've always stayed in contact. And as a matter of fact, he was here in Dallas, I believe last month or so, right? And we had a nice lunch and we had a beautiful sit-down conversation about the insides of the World Oyama karate fight team. And we want to hear about these stories because it's very, very interesting stories. And I always believe I'm a student of history, and I've always believed if you don't talk about this stuff will be forgotten and never talked about again. So let's quickly dive in. I mean, you started at the world headquarters, World Oyama Karate in New York City. And as we know it, it was in Greenwich Village, right? In the middle of Greenwich Village. And I believe you started somewhere around 16 years old, right? Am I correct?
Yeah, I'd have to do the math, but I was born in 1967, and I started in January 85. So
Yeah.
In January of 1985 is when I started. And actually, interestingly enough, back then it was Kyokushin. Like on my card, like my membership card was Kyokushin. My uniform said Kyokushin.
Right.
And I know right around then, I don't know if it was right before then, they just hadn't changed the uniforms. I don't know, or I don't know if it was a few months later, but
Right.
it became World Oyama Karate not long after that. And I just want to mention one other thing kind of in your intro. There are very few interviews that exist with my teacher, Soshu Shigeru Oyama, but really if people Google, like interview with Soshu Shigeru Oyama, probably the main one that comes up, I think it's on Reddit or something, is the one that you did with him, really, because what happened was, for those who don't know, several years ago when Soshi was still alive, I actually had a very high level Japanese translator interview him. So I wrote the questions for Duval because he
Yes.
had a magazine at the time.
That's right.
It was called Us Magazine, I'm not sure, but
Yes, that's right. That's right.
and then I wrote the questions for my teacher. I asked him if I could interview him. I knew someone at the time who was a very high level translator. In fact, they did like I don't know what it's called, but there's a name for it. It's like when you translate for like legal and medical stuff. So this is a Stanford PhD in Japanese language,
Wow.
who's like you can't get any better translator. And this translator interviewed Soshu in Japanese,
Right.
translated it back into English, which I provided for Shidan Duval,
Yeah.
and he put in his magazine. And to this day, I think it's like on Reddit. So if you want to actually see an interview with my teacher, I mean, there may be a couple other floating around. I don't know, but
Yes.
that's like the one. That's
Yeah,
the
that's
one.
right. You know what? I almost forgot about that. That was an amazing interview. I mean, and then after that interview, I then met him in person in upstate New York at a tournament.
I
And
remember.
I
I remember.
remember a guy by the name of Sheehan Mike Monaco was like, Social want to meet you. Come, come. And I sat with him for a little bit and it was very interesting. I mean, I was like, at all. Like, this is the Superman of full contact karate, right? So, but it was a great moment in time. So, as you, a 16-year-old, growing up in New York City, and as we talked last month when you was here in Fort Worth, you said you participated in other sports, but what was it like from you transitioning from like the other sports going into this style of karate? Like you probably didn't know the differences at that time, but when you stepped foot into that particular dojo, what was that moment for you? What was that like for you?
I can only speak from my own experience, and I'm sure everyone has their own background and experience, but I'll answer that from my experience. I was a very good athlete. I was an excellent athlete. So any sport I played, with some exceptions, I was rising to the top level. However, I would not consider myself a tough kid. I mean, I wasn't a wimp. I wasn't a wimp, but I wasn't, I didn't really know how to fight. I just, you know, it's kind of funny. I almost feel like when I was a kid in Brooklyn, because people knew how athletic I was, they kind of thought I could fight, which I really couldn't.
Right.
But that got me a lot of kind of room around the neighborhood. But I really didn't know how to fight. Um, and the neighborhood, as you know, was dangerous. Brooklyn was a dangerous place. I mean, just my school was in downtown Brooklyn. I used to walk to school, um, and I feel like I don't want to say attacked or mugged, but something like that, like 4 out of 5 days. So I wanted to learn how to defend myself. I didn't understand anything about martial arts. I didn't understand about like ground fighting and stand-up fighting and boxing and full contact karate or point karate or judo. I didn't understand anything. I just probably saw some karate movies on TV and I looked in the yellow pages because there was no internet. I mean, there was an internet. I think the internet was invented like in the 1960s or something, but it was only in certain like colleges. I think it was at like Stanford or something. But the internet became available to, the population in, let's say, the late 1990s. So certainly in 1985, there was no internet. So I took the big yellow pages. I lived in Brooklyn. I took the Manhattan yellow pages. I looked up karate or martial arts, and I saw my teacher standing there. He had like that, I was like, he looks like he knows how to fight. So I just like went and I just signed up. And I started training, and I did not understand about like Shotokan and Ishinryu and
Right.
Kyokushin. I didn't understand anything. In fact, there's a funny story which I've told a couple times, but it just it cracks me up when I think about it. And I don't think I ever told you this, and I
Yeah.
know you're gonna laugh.
Uh,
So again, I was never disrespectful at all. I was not a disrespectful person. However, I did not understand Japanese culture. I did not understand martial arts culture. I didn't understand anything. I just kind of was following what everyone was doing with the bowing and the. I remember I was a white belt and I was there for a bit. I was a senior in high school. I was a white belt. I was a skinny kid. I mean, right now I'm 6'2", 220. Then I was like 6'2", 155,
right.
And, I was getting by just on athleticism, but I wasn't particularly tough. And I was a white belt. And I noticed some people had a stripe on their white belt. So me not knowing anything, I walked up to actually Soshu's son, Ted Oyama, because I think he had a dojo in Connecticut, but for whatever reason, he was helping out at the time. So he was there. I didn't know who he was. I just saw he had a black belt on. So I was like, hey, when do I get a stripe? I just like asked him like that. When do I get a stripe? And he was like, oh, when Soshu, well, actually, then he was named his title was Sekoshian. Then, oh, when Sekoshian thinks you're ready. I was like, okay, like just goes to show how ignorant I was. So that was kind of my beginnings at World Oyama Karate.
Interesting. Interesting. Fast forward in as you going into the art and being around Soshu Oyama, you had an opportunity to be part of the fight team. And I always say the elite fight team because you were getting your training directly from Soshu. Um, what was the process like in being selected for that team? Or what type of hell did you go through to get selected to be on that team? And I know Soshu, he was the guy that personally select each and every individual that was part of that team. So what was that process like?
I had an interesting evolution to that team. Um, I'm sure everyone's was different, so I'll just talk about mine.
Yeah.
Um, I started when I was a senior in high school, as I mentioned. Then I went to college in Boston for 4 years. I was a tennis player. I played on the varsity tennis team in college. So I was very wrapped up in playing. I was wrapped up in tennis my whole childhood, and I was certainly wrapped up in tennis in college because I was a varsity athlete for 4 years. Um, However, in the summers, I would come home to Brooklyn, as college students tend to do when in the summer, and I would train every day at Oyama. I mean, I had summer jobs, but I would at night train. Um, and I was getting really good. I was just
Mm.
getting really, really, really good because I was filling out a little bit, and you know, I guess I was tough. I didn't realize I was tough, but I guess I was. And I remember even as like an orange or green belt, I was giving everyone not everyone, but most people a hard time. Um, and then I graduated college in May of 1989. I moved back to Brooklyn, and then I started training like 6 days a week, not with aspirations of being a fighter. I just liked it. And I think when I was a brown belt, I was giving pretty much everyone a hard time.
Nice.
Maybe there was some like elite black belt that I couldn't, who was a fighter, but even the black belts, the general black belts, I was doing well. And I remember you thought the first story was funny. You're gonna really laugh. I never told you this one. I don't think you're gonna laugh. So it sounds kind of weird because most people who trained at my dojo were very just interested in the whole culture, and they either wanted to be a fighter or go to the tournaments or support. I had no interest in anything except going and training. I didn't want to, not that I was antisocial, but I wasn't particularly trying to make friends with anyone. I didn't want to watch the tournaments. I didn't want to know when the tournaments were. I certainly didn't want to fight in the tournaments. I just was going for self-defense and I liked the training.
Right.
So this just goes to show how funny it is. So there was a tournament in like, I don't know, it must have been like 1989 or something, like, a few months after I graduated from college.
Right.
It was a knockdown tournament. And Soshu said, everyone, if you're not fighting it, it has to come watch. And I'm like, I don't want to go to some stupid tournament. In my head, I'm like, I don't care about this. I'm just here for self-defense and
Right.
training. It's like, I don't go to some dumb tournament. In my head, I'm thinking that. And so she said, anyone who doesn't attend the tournament, I'm demoting one belt.
Uh-oh.
So I was like, damn, I got it. So I looked at my calendar and it was actually on the Jewish holiday of Yom Kippur. Now,
Oh,
I'm Jewish.
right.
So I wrote Soshu a letter and I was like, I'd love to come to the tournament. However, it's falling on Yom Kippur. It's the most holy holiday of the Jewish religion. I'm Jewish. I can't attend. So he was like, okay, what is he going to say? So I got out of that one even go. This just goes to show how funny it is that I ended up becoming a fighter. I didn't even want to go watch it. I just
Right.
no interest at all. So anyway, and then I remember after the tournament, Soshu made a speech. He's like, I'm never scheduling a tournament on a Jewish holiday again. So anyway, so that was like October 89. So then this is a funny story. So then it's like May of 90, and I'm like a brown belt. Good. I was good brown belt, training all the time.
Right.
There was what's called a semi-knockdown tournament, which of course you know what that is. For those
Yes.
who don't know, number one, instead of bare-fisted, it's with a pad, and also instead of bare shin, it's with a shin guard.
Yes.
And also the quality or caliber of fighter that would compete in a semi-knockdown is lower. So
Yeah.
it's a different, type of it's not as an elite of a tournament.
Right.
Um, so anyway, there was a semi-knockdown in Connecticut in May of 90. And Soshu again said, if anyone's not fighting, you have to come watch or I'm demoting everyone a belt. So I'm like, there's no Jewish holiday then. So I was like, I just drove up on a Saturday morning to Connecticut, like just being like, I want to be anywhere but here, but I
Right.
don't want to get them. I want to keep my brown belt.
Yeah.
So I'm in the stands. Now again, I had gained a little weight from senior in high school to just graduating college. So I was probably walking around at like 178, something
Right.
like that.
Right.
So I'm sitting in the stands and this black belt came up to me, who's a nice guy, a guy who was kind of like one of my mentors at the dojo, you could say. And
Right.
he goes, hey, you fighting today? I go, no, I'm fighting. And he's like, you gonna fight today? And I'm like, I don't even fight in tournaments. Like, I'm here because I don't want to get my belt demoted. He's like, no, you're gonna fight today. And I said, I don't even have my gi. He's like, you should be ready to fight at the drop of a hat. So yeah, I'll get you a gi and I'll get you a brown belt. So of course, I fought. So I weighed in at 178, which is heavyweight, because 175 and below is middleweight. So actually, 176, you can fight a guy who's 250 pounds.
Right.
And,
That's
I will say that particular semi knockdown was really hot. Like there were some serious knockdown fighters who just did that one. I don't know if they were trying to stay sharp or whatever, but it was a really good semi knockdown. And I fought in the heavyweight, and I did really good. So Soshu, made a comment, and I was like, okay, whatever, that's cool. So then, fast forwarding a little bit, so now it's like July of 1990. I'm still a brown belt. And but I'm getting good. I'm training 6 days a week. I'm good. I'm like fighting. I
right.
just figured that was my one semi knockdown. I'm not doing any more tournaments. I'm certainly not doing a knockdown tournament.
Right.
But anyway, so I'm at the camp, and I'm at the camp, and all these other fighters from around the country were there, because like the other dojos from like California and stuff, they all brought their best fighters for the camp.
Right.
It's the last day, and we're all sitting. It was in Massachusetts, in the Berkshires, I believe. And we're all sitting in this big field, and there must have been 200 people there, students.
Wow.
And so she called like our three best black belt fighters up, and the two best black belts from California, whatever. And he called me up to the middle. I'm like a brown belt who I don't want any part of this. So he told us to all sit in front of everyone. And then he's like, we're gonna have like fights in front of everybody, like fights, like a tournament fight. But
Right.
like you could try it, full blast, try
Right.
to
100% hits.
so he called up like a couple guys, one of our best guys from New York and one of this best guy from California. And I'm like, what am I doing here? And then he calls up this black belt from California, and me, I'm a brown belt. And
Right.
I was just thinking like, I just don't want to get KO'd. I remember thinking like, I just don't want to get KO'd.
Right. Right. Right.
Like I'm sure I'm going to get beat up, but I just don't want to. He was like a second or third degree, but like an active tournament fighter, and I'm a
Right.
brown belt.
Yes.
I just and I just beat the shit out of him. I remember in front of everybody, and really just trying to survive. I wasn't even, but somehow that happened. So that happened, and then that night I'm walking around the camp like to dinner, and Soshu comes up to me. He's like, "I was very happy with what I saw. I still had no aspirations of being a fighter."
Mhm.
And now we fast forward a little more. Now it's the fall of 90, and we're in class. And so she said, anyone who's fighting in the knockdown in October, come to the front of the class. It didn't even occur to me. I'm not coming to the front of class. And that same black belt who made me fight in the semi knockdown, he took his hand on my back and pushed me to the front of the class. I'm like, I guess I'm fighting in the knockdown. So then there was like special training for the knockdown, and
Right.
I was just off to the races. And then later, as you mentioned, there was an elite fight team, more than black belt, more than knockdown fighters, but just the special fight team, like where I fought in Europe. He paid for me to go to Europe, like that, like special closed door training,
Right.
just 3 or 4 of us. And then I became part of that
Right.
scenario.
So now, and for the people who don't know, as you mentioned, it wasn't just the good black belt fighters. It was now the elite. It's the step up. And so as we talked in the past, often you had fighters that would come from Japan over to live in New York City in the dojo and literally train every single day, but not just from 6 to 7:30 or 7:30 to 8:30. They'd be training all day long. And talk about those experiences and what it was like to kind of live in the dojo, like you're training and then all of a sudden you bandage up your injuries and then you go to sleep in the corner.
Well, a couple things. So that's of course what's known as an uchideshi, which in Japanese translates loosely to inside student. And you're right, there were several Japanese guys who came over and lived there and slept on the mat and trained all day and night, not at night, but trained all day, taught. And then, later on, they became tournament fighters and probably, graduated the uchideshi program and opened their own dojos. I was never an uchideshi in the full sense of the word, because I never slept there, but I
Right.
was like an uchideshi because I was training there
Every day.
all the time,
Right.
training with those guys, and they were like my training partners,
Right. Right.
and it was great. I loved every minute of it.
Well, if you can recall some of the prominent names in today's Kyokushin or or knockdown karate, some of the names that you actually trained and or sparred with during those times.
Well, a couple things. So, of course, Gorai, who I believe is, I don't know his exact title, but I think he's like one of the main Shihans
Yeah,
of
he
the
is.
United States in
Yes.
Manhattan. We were training partners. We fought each other in a tournament. Um, so that's a prominent guy.
Yeah.
Um, there were some, excuse me, there were some other guys who really made a name for themselves in, Kyokushin or branches of Kyokushin
Right.
that I trained with. There was one guy who I just comes to mind. His name was Takao, who was just really good. He won a lot of tournaments. Really nice guy too. I really liked him.
You also mentioned Willie Williams. You had a sparring session with Willie Williams.
Willie Williams, I knew well. I had many sparring sessions with him. I fought Willie too many times to count. Now, of course, he was what I would call over the hill. I say that respectfully because in
Right.
1979, if I fought him, even in my prime, I don't think I would have done well at all. But of course, he was older, so I was fine against him. Um,
Yes.
and it was funny. This is very odd, but I always did good against bigger fighters. I did not like fighting little fighters, and I'll tell you why. When I was a middleweight, when I would fight a little, Japanese lightweight with like lightning fast kicks to the head, I
Yes.
didn't like that. When I
Yes.
fought big heavyweights, like I could take a lot, so I wasn't really worried. I could punch really hard.
Yes.
That my style was good against bigger guys. So Willie, like I said, I wouldn't want to have fought him in 1979. I'm
Right.
sure I wouldn't have lasted long. But at that age and that size, I had no problem.
Right, right. I got you. And then again, I think we had conversations again. Oh, I've watched one of your interviews with man, I forget his name. He was from Connecticut. He was a Hispanic guy from Connecticut.
Oh, Calvin.
Yes, and you guys were talking about how, again, how you guys would train like literally all day, morning class, midday class, evening class, night classes, and then you guys had your special elite training. And then you kind of like it was mentioned like you guys kind of crawled over to the corner, had a little pad and kind of went to bed and then repeat the same the next day. The next day. I also mentioned the story how you said that Soshu was supposed to have this special training on one Sunday, and you thought he didn't show up. Talk about that.
So there was one, like not only in addition to all the special training you had mentioned,
Right.
there was sometimes Soshi would just say, okay, this Sunday we're having a special training just for the Uchideshi and or elite fight team.
Right.
So there was one time he told me, okay, be at the dojo at I think it was 10 a.m. 10 a.m. on a Sunday. I lived in Brooklyn. It was the part of Brooklyn I lived in, the part of Manhattan the dojo was in was very close. I think
Right.
once you got on the subway, it was like 12 minutes. It was like nothing. So, I might have driven that day. I might have driven my car over the Brooklyn Bridge. I don't remember, but I show up and the UC dash you're there and we're ready for like this, torture session. And all of a sudden it's like 10 a.m., 10:15, 10:30, 10:45. And so she just didn't show up. So finally, I think it was Takao, the guy I mentioned who I liked a lot, who was super tough. He said, oh, I'm going to make some food, in the back of the little kitchen. You want to eat with us? I said, yeah. I remember, I think he made like Japanese style chicken curry. So we're eating it. And Soshu shows up. And as you know, when you're going to train, you probably shouldn't be eating 5 minutes before. But somehow just, I'm sure some quantum physicist could explain this, but I just, the way I looked up to Soshu, I just looked at him like a demigod at the time. And he was ready for us to train. And it was like my food just like digested. I just felt perfect. I felt like I ate an hour and a half ago. And then we trained and I felt fine. And yeah, I really loved him. It was great.
Wow. And so now, with all of that training, you did have an opportunity to go to Europe to compete like to represent the American team at a European Championship. What was the differences like between the Americans and the Europeans at that time, if you recall?
Well, there's a couple things, and there's been an evolution. Like if you look at like the Americans and the Japanese and the Europeans in like the 70s and the 80s and the 90s and and even now, and with the Russians getting involved and the Brazilians and
Right.
because I'm just talking about the early 1990s.
Yes.
answer the question because
Yes.
that particular fight, it was in April of 1991
Right.
when I represented the U.S. for that particular
Right.
European full contact tournament. So what I'll say is this: the Dutch guys were just like better than everyone else at the time.
Okay.
'Cause we in the late 80s, like Kyokushin was a very linear style. It was kind of like left, right, low kick. It's just
Right.
great,
Exactly.
great. And then you got to the Europeans, and they were like right to the solar plexus, left hook the liver, right low kick. Like it was a whole new game. It was like that Dutch kickboxing style that kind of like rubbed off on the Dutch full contact team, or maybe vice versa with those guys. I don't know.
Right.
But do I think the Dutch guys punched and kicked harder than the Japanese? No. Do I think the Dutch guys could take more than the Japanese? No. Do I think they were mentally tougher? No. They're probably equal, but their fight strategy was way, 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 way superior. And I
Wow.
saw with my own eyes. I
Yes.
saw with my own eyes. So
Right.
very top level Japanese uchideshi
Right.
winning the tournaments in the late 80s.
Yes.
I saw them run into the Dutch guys in the early 90s and get their ass kicked.
Wow. That's crazy.
Many, 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 many.
Right. And you rightfully so when you said there's periods of time, if you look at the world map, how initially the Americans and the Japanese kind of dominated like in the 70s, right? And then it kind of switched a little bit to Europe, and then it swung a little bit to South America, Brazil, and then it swung back to the Russians. So it's interesting time how the evolution of this style of fighting kind of developed over the years. So with that being said, as the evolution and the development of the styles is changing and developing and changing and developing, and as we are in today's world, what are your thoughts on the term karate is dead?
Well, I think it's a cool title. Again, not to get too metaphysical, but there's an idea of polarity. The ancient teaching, this guy is his name was Hermes. I think he lived, I think 2,500 years ago. I'm not exactly sure. I think in Egypt. I'm not exactly sure where he was from, but he was one of the most well-respected metaphysicians to this day. So like and he talked one of the things he teaches about is what he calls the law of polarity. And he says like if you're kind of like short-sighted, you'll like live in a world of opposites, like hot and cold and good and bad or whatever. But he says really if you see it from a higher level, polarity just means that things are on the poles. Like this is like one side of the pole, other side of the pole, and really it's the same. Things that look opposite are actually the same thing, but in different degrees. Like if you're in a room that's completely dark, and then you start putting the dimmer on, light, 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 light. Well, where did dark stop and light start? It's kind of hard to tell. Like
Right.
light and dark seem opposite, but they're really the same thing in different degrees.
Right.
I think death and life is the same thing. And, karate is dead, on the deeper level could mean karate's alive. But
Right.
that's just a little side note I wanted to throw in. But I
Yeah.
think it's cool. I think it's a cool title.
Yeah.
And it might mean also that a certain aspect of karate is dead, but there's a new updated version of karate that's alive.
Yeah.
Um, and I think also that's a couple thoughts I have on it. My
Yeah.
last thought on it is people have to decide. Well, let me rephrase that. I'm not telling anyone what to do, so I'm not saying they have to do anything. But to me, it seems like it's wise to decide like, why do I do karate?
Yeah.
Now, if someone's like, I do karate because I want to get in shape and meet friends,
Hmm.
that's cool. There's probably a Shotokan dojo to do that.
Right.
Or I'm not dissing Shotokan, I'm just using it as like a random name. But or let's say someone's like, I actually want to learn to defend myself. Like that's on my list of things to do. Well,
Right.
if they're going to like a point system karate school. I don't think they're going to learn to defend themselves. I don't think that's practical self-defense. So they might be like, oh, maybe I should do Kyokushin because that is more practical self-defense. So I'm just saying, like, it might be wise to be like, wait, what is my checklist for why I train in the first place? And then
Right.
I was like, you know what? I don't care about self-defense. I just want to get in shape and meet friends. Okay, well, do Ishinru or whatever it is. I'm
Right.
not doing that either, or whatever they do there. But let's say someone's like, I want to be tough and I want to learn how to fight. I don't want to make friends. I don't want to get in great shape. Well, I don't want to do karate because you could do something, you could do judo or something. But
Exactly.
I think Kyokushin's a good choice.
Good, good, good. Yes. So now, black belt, Kyokushin, you spent a lot of time here. You competed on a high level. Now you're entering into the space of Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. When did that start and why? Coming from a hard stand-up foundation, what was it about Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu that attracted you to that community?
Back in the early 90s, I thought that Kyokushin, particularly my teacher, Shigeru Oyama, I thought we were the toughest people walking around the planet. I thought we could beat anyone up, didn't matter
Right,
what we did. I
right.
was always a little wary of boxers, though. I always thought like a really good pro boxer could be a problem. But outside of that, like that's, in my ignorance at the time, I just thought the rest was just like a joke. So I remember it was around 1991 or two, and I was, fighting and, fighting for Soshu and a very elite level of training. And I remember it was kind of funny. I went to some gym. I'm not really a gym kind of guy, like where you go lift weights and stuff, but I was like traveling somewhere. So I was like, oh, I'll go work out. They have a little gym here. And
Yeah.
it was like a winter morning. It was like no one there. It was a guy sitting behind the desk just by himself. And I was just there and I was like, oh, I think I had some kind of pass to use the gym. And I was like, oh, can I use the gym? He's like, oh, yeah, sure. And like I said, I'm not really a gym guy, but I guess I was doing pull-ups or whatever I was doing there. And me and him just started talking because it was like a cold winter morning and like no one came to train. So it was just me and this guy in
Mhm.
like 1991 or two. And he's like, and I think I was like maybe shadow boxing in front of the mirror, and maybe there was a heavy bag. And he's like, "Oh, I see you do martial arts. Have you heard of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu?" And again, in my ignorance, I was thinking like, I don't know, I never heard of Gracie Jiu-Jitsu, but I'm sure, we beat them up, whatever. And he's like, "No, these guys beat everyone up." And I'm like,
Right,
it was before the UFC, so it was just like the Gracie in action tape floating around.
right,
And then I was thinking, I mean, the guy was nice, so I didn't want to say anything disparaging to him, but I was thinking in my head, I'm like, give me a break, like whatever. Someone else is living in some martial arts fantasy. I was obviously quite mistaken.
right.
Uh, Not too long after that, I got my hands on this Gracie in action tape, and I'm like, whoa, these guys are good. And and then some time went on a little bit, and then later on, I was like, I should try this, and then I started doing jiu-jitsu, and yeah, I do have a black belt in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. But here's the difference. I'll just give you the difference. I mean, I'm not bad. I mean, I can, I'm okay in jiu-jitsu. I'm not, I'd say like this. This is what I'll say.
Right,
This is what I'll say. I'm nobody in jiu-jitsu. I am a black belt and I'm
right,
pretty good. I'm good. I am a legit black belt.
right,
With that said, I'm in the grand scheme of things, I'm nobody in jiu-jitsu.
right.
But I remember like in 1992, because we were the headquarters and they were like, oh, so and so is coming from so and so country and he's the champ. I was like, I want to fight him. Like I was really, really, really good at full contact karate in the early 90s.
Right,
Really, really good. I
right.
was fighting world-class fighters and doing well.
Mhm.
So that's the difference. Like jiu-jitsu is like a hobby. I'm all right, I'm all right. But stand-up was what I was really good at.
Right, right. And I respect that. I mean, because I respect Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and it takes a while, and it takes on average about 8 to 10 years to receive a black belt. So the fact that you dedicated that time to achieve that level, right? It's awesome, you know? And so did you have any in the early parts, in the early times when you were coming into the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, did you have any like growing pains going from the hard stand up into the groundwork?
Yeah, I think my real, and I don't even know if it's exactly related, but what I had to realize, and I'm going to relate it to something Soshu said. Sometimes Shian Duval, like you hear something, it's just so obvious, but then you're like, why didn't I even know that? Because if I gave it some thought,
Right.
obvious, but I never gave it any thought, so I didn't know it. And then you hear it put a certain way, like, oh yeah, obviously. So I had an experience, which kind of answers your question, which I'll say. And then Soshu, my teacher, said something in the same topic, which I'll explain. And what I learned was you can't like rest on your laurels. Like you got to just keep training. Like you can't be like, oh, I've attained purple belt in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, but
Right.
I'm going to take 5 months off and come back to the dojo, but I strap on my purple belt and now here's a lower belt. No, that guy might beat you up because he's been training 6 days a week. So
Right.
that was kind of what I had to kind of come to terms with in Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. If you want to be good, you have to train. You can't like not train just because you have some belt. So that was kind of like to answer your question, like kind of a
Right.
growing pain or whatever. And
Yeah.
because I was so good at stand up, I was kind of just used to being really good. And then when I was in jiu-jitsu, I'm like, I'm a beginner. I'm not that good. You know, as a beginner, no one's good.
Yeah.
So I had to kind of like reset myself for that. And then what Soshu said that when he first came to America, there's a whole story with this, but he was like talking about how he had to get in shape and he was like jogging. And then he wrote in his autobiography, he's like, even a karate master has to stay in shape. So like it's obvious, but I might have thought like Soshu is Soshu. He doesn't even have to exercise. He'll just, but he's still a human being who needs to keep up with the training. And that it's kind of obvious, but it was a good wake up call for me.
I think too, and a lot of times in the modern world, and maybe it's not talked about in a lot of schools, is like when you receive or when you've earned your black belt, that doesn't, or at least your first degree or your shodan, that doesn't necessarily mean you're a master. You've mastered basic technique. You're a master basic technique, and then now you have to go to the next level. It's almost like you've graduated high school now. Okay, good. You have a high school diploma. Good. Very good. Now let's go on to college to get a higher learning, you see? So I think a lot of times too, we kind of fall short with that. Like, oh, I'm a first degree black belt. I'm good. And I think it's uniquely why Sosai Oyama created first and second degree senpai, third and fourth sensei, fifth and above shion, right? So we can kind of curtail that, almost like that ego type of thing, to keep the first and second degrees, their ego down. Now, physically, first and second degree should be strong, right? Very strong, because they've gone through the process of mastering those basics. And naturally, a fifth, sixth, seventh, they're going to be strong, but not as strong as somebody who's like in their 20s. But knowledge wise, they should be much more knowledgeable of the system, right? They should be able to break down technique and understanding of technique much better than a first and second degree.
And I think part of it, in addition to your excellent point, it just shows that in the dojo and out, everyone should be nice and kind and respectful to each other.
Absolutely.
What happens is I saw with my own eyes some black belts who just got their black belt. They just figured they could abuse everyone now in the
Mhm.
dojo.
Yeah.
And I remember when I was like a brown belt, but the thing is, when I was a brown belt, like the kind of brown belt I was, training 6 days a week, on my way to being a tournament fighter,
Right.
on my way to but there were some black belts, and I was like, it doesn't matter that you're a black belt because I'm about to beat you up.
Yeah.
So the thing is this, like, I always feel like it's wise to just be kind to people. And even if you are a black belt and they're a white belt and whatever, like just be kind to people. And I did see some black belts who were not kind to people just because they got their black belt.
Yeah.
And you know, why they did it, I don't know, but I definitely saw it quite a bit. I just want to say one thing. I remember this. I was one time it was a black belt test, and we had this particular black belt at the school. I'm not going to say his name, but he wasn't even tough. But he wasn't a tournament. He was just a black belt, and
Right.
I remember there was um there was a woman testing. So the dojo's full of people, and Soshu's sitting at his desk, and people are feeling, and this particular black belt who liked abusing everyone verbally. He wasn't even tough. Like he wasn't
Mhm.
physically abusing everyone. He was verbally abusing everyone.
Right.
He was there, and we had a woman who actually is highly respected. She was like a fourth degree. She's, first of all, very nice person, super good fighter, high level. And so she wanted her to come in. She was outside off the mat. So she wanted her to come in to fight this female who was testing.
Right.
So she called her. He said her name. I'm not going to say her name, but said her name. and she didn't come. And he said her name again. It wasn't like she was being disrespectful. She just didn't hear it. And this
Mhm.
black belt guy, he goes out the door and he's like, "Come on!" He's like, "So she called you 3 times already." I'm like, "Are you nuts, man? This girl's she's like a fourth degree, one of the most respected people. You're like a first degree bull,
Yeah.
But I took care of him later.
That often happens. Especially when I was coming up, that happens too. You that took care of him later type thing. That always happens.
Took care of him later many times.
Yeah, right. All right, let's fast forward now. We talked a little bit about your Brazilian. We definitely talked about your knockdown, Kyokushin karate career. But let's talk about now you as being a healer, not just a doctor, but a healer, right? And so you are a doctor in chiropractic, right? And so, and, oh, just a side note, while you are in your profession, your current profession, you also have or had the opportunity to be a healer to a lot of the UFC big names in the career. But before we go to that, let's just talk about the zone healing. Let's just kind of focus on that because we talked about it in when you was in here in Fort Worth, and I've always known you to do the zone healing, but I don't think we ever really talked about it. And you enlightened me on just that moment when we were sitting down having lunch. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about the 6 zones. Let's talk about the zone healing and the profession and your I could say your mentor, the person who you learned this method from.
So a few things. So first of all, when most people, and let me preface what I'm saying now very
Yes.
clearly by saying I'm not trying to convince anyone of anything. I'm
Right.
just answering the question. People can believe whatever they want. I'm
Right.
just telling you what the facts are. FACTS. These are the
Right.
most people when they think of chiropractic think of one of two things. Either I wouldn't go to a chiropractor, I don't like that. Okay, fair enough. Or no, I like chiropractic. It's really good for neck and back pain. That's what people usually think one of those two things.
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, when chiropractic was started in 1895, the guy who founded chiropractic had nothing to do with neck and back pain. His theory was that when the spine is straight, nerves flow properly to the cells of the body, and people who have digestive problems or gynecological problems or immune system problems or nervous system problems or glandular system problems or whatever problems, when their spine is aligned and the nerves flow properly, these things heal, as also does neck and back pain. So that's how the profession was started. That's what the profession really is. Now, from 1895 to 2026, the profession is kind of turned upside down. Now, if you go to 99% of, actually, if you go to 99.9% of chiropractors' offices, um, and you ask everyone in the waiting room, "Hey, what are you here for?" Like, what are you here for? 99% of them are there for neck and back pain. So
Right.
you're not usually there for their thyroid or their liver or their digestion or whatever.
Right.
But why the profession changed from its inception till now is a whole different conversation. We don't even have to explore that. I'm just saying that's what happened for whatever reason.
Right.
But I'm from the old school lineage, and I started practicing in the mid 1990s. And if you went into my waiting room over the years and you asked everyone, "Hey, what are you here to see, doctor? What are you here to heal from?"
Yeah.
Well, 9 out of 10 of the people there will tell you they came because they had period cramps that they want to get over, or they have a circulatory disorder that they want to heal from, or they have a digestive problem they want to heal from, or they took a blood test and their liver or thyroid or whatever was messed up and they want to heal from that. Maybe 1 out of 10 came because they had a musculoskeletal neck and back pain. So that's what I do.
Mhm.
Um, Now, within chiropractic, there was a guy named Dr. Thurman Fleet. He practiced in actually Texas in
Mm.
the 1930s, 40s, 50s, et cetera. And he was one of the greatest healers I'm aware of in any kind of healing, actually. Um, and Dr. Thurman Fleet invented something in the 1930s called zone therapy, which I was taught starting in the early 90s. And I learned it, and then I later refined it, and I developed what's called zone technique, which is based on me learning Dr. Fleet's zone therapy from a few of his disciples. These guys were teaching me. They were in their 80s in the early 1990s teaching me. And then I took what I had learned from them, which was zone therapy, and practiced it for about a decade. Then I altered it a bit and created zone technique. And then, I did it for many years, incredibly successfully. And I'll just say this. There's a lot of theories out there and a lot of philosophies, and that's fine. Everyone's entitled to their theories and philosophies, but results trump everything. I mean, people can say
Right.
whatever they want, but results, someone's like, I have the best acupuncturist. No, maybe you do, or I have the best herbalist. Could be. I have a great energy healer. Okay. I have a great chiropractor. Good. Okay, that's great and everything. This lady here has endometriosis. It's a gynecological condition. Which one of you is going to fix it? I mean, I don't, so results to results. Who can really deliver? And I just want to say that the results of zone technique are unparalleled in my experience. And what I'm getting to here, Shian Duval, if you take an imaginary map, here's an imaginary map, and here's a pin on the map. This is a doctor's office, could be a chiropractor or some kind of other doctor or healer. Where do their patients come from? Like, where does we'll say chiropractor, where do their patients reside? Well, they reside within a 45-minute drive of their office. So here's the pin. Their patients live here within 45 minutes away.
Right.
You might have one or two patients who love them. They drive an hour and a half. It could be. But I just want to say, in my years of practice, I've had patients fly, that's right, fly into me from 30 different cities around the world for healing. People
Right.
flying into me from Chicago, Guam, Hawaii, all over the 50 states, Germany, Holland, UK, Ireland, South Korea, Hong Kong, Malaysia, people flying into me for healing.
Right.
What does that mean? It means the results are spectacular. Not to mention, we've had many patients drive 4 hours each way. That's 8 hours of driving in a day to get a session. So the results were and continue to be and are spectacular. And then in 2017, I opened a school, so it's open to chiropractors and any type of doctor or healer. And of course, anyone who's interested can go to zoneschoolofhealing.com, zoneschoolofhealing.com. If you are a doctor or healer and you want to be a better doctor or healer, there's an online program and also in-person seminars. It's all right there.
Right. That's great. Do in the zone healing, let's talk in terms of a fighter, right? Um, and a lot of times I think fighters, they go through a lot. I mean, of course they go through a lot of physical stress, right? But a lot of times I would think that they also go through emotional stress that might affect their body. So how does emotional stress manifest physically in a fighter's body, good or bad? And how do you, and like, without going too specific, the adjustments that you would do for somebody who's going through an emotional stress. It could be somebody who have a very hectic schedule, and in today's world, career is everything to a lot of people, right? And sometimes career will draw you away and create stress. Stress is a big thing. So how would you use your method in helping somebody correct their stress that might affect their body?
Well, there's a few things here to look at. Number one, regardless of what caused the problem, which we'll get to in a second, because you asked a specific question about that, which I will answer. But regardless of what caused the problem's still there. Like, there is a physical manifestation in the body. So, um, regardless if it was an emotional cause or another cause, there's still a physical manifestation which ends up in the body, which is presenting to me. They might have IBS, which is a digestive problem. They might have a blood pressure issue, which is a circulatory problem. They might have a um, adrenal issue, which is a glandular problem. Whatever. The bottom line is it's still there physically, and um, I would examine their body via the zone technique, see which systems in their body are not balanced, and then go about balancing them so their body can heal and their digestion can become perfect if that was their problem, or their blood sugar, excuse me, their blood pressure can normalize if that was their problem, or their adrenals can heal so their glands heal if that was their problem. That's the physical component, meaning I'm looking at the physical manifestation and then I'm doing something physically to heal what's there. However,
Right.
you brought up a great point, which is how does it get like that in the first place?
Right.
And how often is the cause emotional from stress or whatever? Well, I would say the cause is emotional 99% of the time, by the way. But
Right.
here's the thing. Let me just give the most simplistic example because you said let's not go too intricate. Let's give a simple example. Anyone knows whether you're a doctor or healer or not, it's pretty obvious that your digestive organ, I'm just using this as an example. I can give 1,000 examples. Your digestive organs require a certain amount of blood flow to operate. There's blood flowing to your digestive organs, and there's a certain amount of blood in your digestive organs for them to work properly. Obviously, the blood circulation goes all over the body. One of those places are the digestion
Right.
area. Well, let's just say someone's at their desk and their boss says something they don't like and they're pissed off, but they can't do anything because they don't want to get fired. But their body goes into fight or flight because
Mm.
that's a natural, but they don't have an outlet because they're not going to fight or flight. They're going to sit at their desk and sweating and be pissed off.
Right.
So what happens is because their body doesn't understand that primitive response of fight or flight, the blood starts going into the skeletal muscle to prepare it for fight or flight. But they don't get to have an outlet. They're just sitting at their desk being pissed at their boss, sweating, whatever. Well, what happens is now you have an excess of blood in the skeletal muscles, preparation for fight or flight. But guess what? Now the blood is not in the digestive organs. I mean, there's still some, but there's not enough. And then the person, they have, they get heartburn or acid reflux or IBS or diarrhea or constipation. And they wonder why. It's because that emotional cause of anger or irritation, which led in my example to that blood scenario, and all of a sudden, they have digestive problems, not because they eat poorly, not because they have bad genetics. They have digestive problems because of anger. So
Right.
that's an example of an emotion trickling down and affecting the body. Now, I already said earlier, the person still presents to me with a digestive problem. Um, I have to find out where their body was not balanced and balance it so their digestion can heal. And when it comes to the emotional cause, there are ways, which is kind of it would take a longer conversation, but just I would just say there are ways to interact with someone so that the things beyond the physical can heal, whether it's mental, emotional, spiritual, whatever. And I certainly teach that to my students in Zone School of Healing.
Gotcha. Gotcha. I mean, it's very interesting as I think, and we talked again, how I remember back in the early 90s, I used to have interaction with a homeopathic doctor, and I remember they had these little pills, right? And so I guess back then it's kind of like, oh, what is this? Like, this is kind of weird. Like, are you really a doctor, right? But then fast forward, decades, 10 years later or more, the healing process is becoming more relevant now, more popular, more into view now, because I think people are looking at medical as, and I think we had this conversation, we talked about it, about being like it's just a band-aid over a problem or an issue, where the healing process is getting you to relieve yourself of that problem, like literally don't have it ever again, you know. And that's the interesting thing about what I think your profession is doing. It's not just putting a band-aid over something, but actually treating the problem so it doesn't exist anymore, right? So with that being said, as you're tying into your martial arts career and your profession as you treating professional athletes, could you recall a story where you helped a professional fighter um, bring himself back? You know, you treated.
One of the many, but one of the more famous ones was BJ Penn. In 2004, BJ Penn was already world champ at welterweight in the UFC. He hurt his neck very badly. His neck was hurting 24/7 when he trained, when he didn't train, when he was awake, when he was asleep, his neck always hurt. Um, he was basically told that he either had to retire and or get neck surgery. He had already tried chiropractic or other chiropractors, that is, not me, and acupuncture and whatever was not healed. And he came to me, we fixed his neck up. And I've been great friends with BJ Penn ever since 2004. And, BJ Penn's had some ups and downs since 2004, but you never heard about his neck again, did you? Because
Right.
we fixed it in 2004. And I was his doctor for many years after that.
Wow, that's interesting. That's a really, I mean, Dr. Peter, you've had a great career and it's growing and it's flourishing. And I'm excited and honored to be here today talking about it and then having connection with you for so many years and always having, we always talk about Kyokushin and then we always end up talking about healing, which is a wonderful thing. And I think that it's interesting enough how in your day while you're fighting, your intention was to hurt or knock out a guy, but then at the same time, you know how to heal them, right? So it's cool. Hey, just give us your information where someone could reach you if they want to know more information about your Zone School of Healing.
Sure. So let me start by saying zoneschoolofhealing.com. If you're a doctor or healer of any type, join the online program. And also you'll see live seminars, attend a seminar will blow you away. And I just want to say one other thing, which we didn't really cover in the interview, but I just wanted to say this. I feel like people sometimes think of things as very extreme, and I'm going to bring it back to Kyokushin, but I want to give a context first. It's like sometimes someone knows someone or doesn't really know them, and they're just like, "Oh, that guy's a great guy. I love that guy's a great guy." And someone else is like, "Oh, that guy's he's I don't like that guy. He's not good. He's not a good person." Well, really, it's not that simple. It ain't that cut and dried. Some people you think are so great, maybe they're not as great as you think, and some people you think are so bad, maybe they're not as bad as you think.
Right.
You know, so I mean, I'm sure historically there have been some people who are extra kind and nice and what we would call good. And I'm sure in history there's been some real evil people. But in general, people have different sides to themselves, and it's really unfair and inaccurate to just label someone as like this or that. So that's the theme I want to bring up. But I want to say something about Kyokushin, particularly my teacher, who I love. He's great, and even right up until he died, I was very in touch with him, and I would always, whenever I came back to New York City, I'd always go out to dinner with him, and we were pretty close. The point is that I feel like people will look at Kyokushin or great masters like him, and they'll just pigeonhole it into, oh, that was super violent. That was a violent time. Or, no, he was the sweetest. He was the most loving. It's not like that in my view, since I'm the one being interviewed, I'm going to say this. Soshu was great. Like he was such a loving, kind man. I only have the best feelings about him. And some of the training was just freaking violent.
Mm,
It's okay. They both exist. We don't have to pretend one or the other. Like
right,
Soshu was a great, great, caring man, one of the greatest martial artists of the last century
right,
or more. However, he was still a human being who's imperfect. I'm sure he did his best, and I'm sure there's a couple things that he, you know, maybe would have done a little differently. I don't know for sure, but it appears that way. But it doesn't matter. Like, yes, the training was intense and, it was violent at times. And I saw some pretty wild stuff, but who cares? Like, that's what it was. And it
right,
doesn't take away from the fact that he was a great, 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 great man. He was very loving, very
right,
caring. He was the best teacher. I love training with him. I loved every minute of it.
right.
I just wanted to say that because I think going back to what we said earlier about polarization, I think people polarize stuff to like, they just want to like define it like this or define it like that. Life's not like that, in my experience.
Right, right. And the fact that you were like right there, right? And if they're good, bad, or indifference, is like that was your takeaway about Soshu, right? I mean, you probably, like you said, you probably seen some nasty things, some like, oh my God, what was that? But at the end of the day, if you think about the overall experience, it made a super impact on your life. You know,
I think
it kind of changed things in your life.
totally, it made a great impact, and it continues to. The only thing that you know, I would just say this. It's hard to know where the limit is. Like if you want to push your students, push, it's probably great because you're pushing them so much farther than they ever thought they could go, which
Ooh,
trickles over to all these things in their life. It's great, but it's hard. It's like this razor's edge, or it's like a cliff. It's like, ooh, that's I don't know, is that even smart or healthy or wise to go that far? And I
right,
think he actually straddled that line amazingly well, like shockingly well.
right,
But when you're standing on the razor's edge or the cliff or whatever the proper term is,
right,
sometimes you're going to go a little bit over it. And I did observe that a couple times.
right.
Considering the overall scenario, considering the overall subject, I think he did better than anyone else I could imagine trying to do it.
Yeah, yeah, I know. I mean, it's amazing. Like every person who I've talked to about Soshu, they say basically the same thing. Like, yeah, we kind of did some crazy things, but listen, it had some impact on my life, and they really loved the guy. You know, they really, really, really loved him. But anyway, thank you so much, Dr. P, for your time. This was a great interview. We again, as I say, we have to do this again. So the next time you're in Dallas, please come by our dojo. I know you intended to come by this time, but timing was a little bit off. But it was a great experience. I always learn something from you because you have great, great stories, and I really appreciate again your time. Everyone, Dr. Pete.
Well, first of all, thank you, Ush. Thank you, Shian Duval. And yeah, when I'm in Dallas next time, I'd love to get together, come to your dojo. And, obviously, I'm always happy to be on your show anytime you want. And again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.